One of my mottos of life is, don't believe in miracles, rely on them.
I was thrilled with the idea of having the car Mario Andretti won the world championship with.
Whenever Paul said, you know, people ask me what I'm doing, I just say, I'm living his dream, man.
Do we want a newer car? No. We like this car.
You could drive past this Dallas building every day for 2 years and never think twice about it. But some crazy stuff is going on inside. This is the home of Ragogo Racing and one of the most historic Formula One cars around, the Lotus 79. The Ragogo team are mechanical wizards, keepers of historical artifacts, but mostly they're racers, keeping the checkered past of racing alive.
The car it's just a beautiful car. It's a beautiful car to look at. It's very popular wherever we go.
It's a very historically significant car. It was one of two that Mario Andretti used in 1978 to win the World Championship.
It was the beginning of ground effect. This car introduced ground effect to the F1 world back in 1978, and it was revolutionary and very dominant that very first year.
Where this car was really revolutionary was in the use of the side pods to produce downforce.
It was a very advanced car at the time because we had a good command over the aerodynamics of cars, and we did a lot of development work.
It's all based on a principle of fluid dynamics that a guy named Bernoulli came up with back in the 18th century. And he was actually interested in water flow back at that time, but the same principles apply to air. Air is fluid also. And what it says is that when air speeds up, the pressure has to go down. So what we're doing is running air underneath the car and letting it expand as it goes backward toward the rear of the car. When it expands, it has to move a longer distance, and when it does that, the pressure drops. So we're actually sucking the car down at speed. So we get extra downforce that way. This car uses an engine called the Ford DFV. It was developed in the mid-60s using Ford's money to develop with, and they got a lot of the things right on this motor. You can get 500 horsepower out of it. We run a little less than that because we like it to last a little longer.
Whenever I come over, you know, being from England, we are a little bit reserved, aren't we?
Yes, I suppose so, yes, yeah.
We're reserved over in England, and to suddenly get involved with Paul Rigo. Whenever I talk to Paul, and he has a phrase that, you know, you're in Rigo's world now.
Now this place came up, it's $1.8 million for 36,000 feet. And I said, what am I going to do with all that space? But I came here and looked at it. Loved it.
We have a fabrication shop where we can take a 40-year-old part and make a jig for it that would allow us to fabricate as many of those as we may need. You know, we have what we call our dirty room, where there's a solvent washer and an ultrasonic parts cleaner, and, you know, grinders, buffers, bead blast equipment that allow us to do a lot of the cleaning that really is required to do an effective inspection.
Need a clutch for your Lotus 7? Or maybe a body for your Europa? Well, the Ragogo headquarters contains one of the largest stocks of Lotus parts in North America, so you're in luck.
A lot of times when you're trying to get to the track, your big holdup is paint. Well, we do have a paint shopper, so that's a big help for us. This season and in our 12 events, there's parts in the oven over there hours before we leave. That's a huge advantage to have that capability on site.
As busy as the Ragogo team is, don't think they won't make time for an interesting side project. Like building a replica of the Lotus Esprit car submarine that James Bond drove in The Spy Who Loved Me? Hey, why not?
Since then, we've taken on a welder and a machine shop. Upholstery guard just came in. My old painter, got him out of retirement. Got the racing thing going on, got a bar.
Paul Riga, will you please adopt me, and I will come and do for you most things, not everything.
It's just a whole lot of fun. It's my little kingdom. Started this thing and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. Like all my friends working here. It's wonderful. It's just heaven.
I guess my claim to fame is knowing Paul. We were best friends in 5th grade. Reacquainted about 6 years ago and stayed his friend for a while, then became his lawyer, his accountant, his concierge, everything else.
Paul and I met in 1981 and he was operating a shop, and I had bought a Lotus road car. And after working on it for a little while, I kind of had to admit that, okay, there's some little secret little things in here that I must not be getting, because I'm struggling with it. So I ran into Paul, and over the course of a couple of weeks we became friends and started working on cars, and soon enough I would work part-time for Paul.
Most everybody here, until recently, was a friend of Paul's before they worked here. For some reason around here it's like chaos. But at the end of the weekend, for instance, on race day, everything turns out great. It's just this charmed existence. We live in a nice little bubble. It's quite the mix of people. We get in lots of fights. It's almost like a reality show, only not scripted or faked. It's a chaos. It's organized chaos, if there's such a thing.
And I brought up the fact that I'd loved vintage racing the motorcycles, and I was going to vintage race a Lotus. It was either going to be my car, you know, that I converted and made a race car out of it, or, you know, we could throw in together, you know, and build us a Europa and go vintage racing. And I was kind of thinking of regional events. You know, there are small clubs that race Texas, Oklahoma. And then we went to a few races. And next thing I knew, he had arranged to buy the Lotus 23B, you know, which is 1962, but they're very popular in racing because they're nice little cars. You can get all the parts, and they're very fast. We have 3 cars that we've been campaigning, average maybe 15 events a year. We're all very Lotus focused, so all the cars are Lotus, and that's because that's what we like to do.
And basically this has developed really over about 2 years. This is all turned around and like a state-of-an-art shop. He's got a 79 F1 famous car and also a Lotus 23B. And now we're racers.
Paul Rigo owns the team and finances the team. And he's been a Lotus guy since I met him in 1981 or so. And this is how he's kind of given back to the company that he always loved and the cars that he always loved.
But I've been a fan of Lotus probably since the late 50s. I think I was always intrigued with Jimmy Clark and what a stunning driver he was, and also Colin Chapman. Colin Chapman was something special.
The founder of Lotus Cars, Colin Chapman, was a design innovator. Instead of relying on raw horsepower for speed, he developed race cars with lightweight and nimble handling. These cars were very successful on the Formula One circuit in the 60s and 70s.
My interest in motor racing goes right back to school days, really, and that goes back to the time of front-engine race cars of the 50s. But I've always been involved in the mechanical side of cars, and I was fortunate enough to become a member of the Lotus company and the racing department under the late Colin Chapman. I've been involved with Ronnie Peterson, Mario Andretti, Jochen Rindt, Senna, a number of top-line drivers, because the Lotus team was a very well-respected and front-running team for a number of years. Hence, we could attract top drivers.
Lotus's small rear-engine cars were so successful in Grand Prix racing that Colin Chapman brought them to the Indianapolis 500 in the early 60s to do battle with the massive American roadsters of that era.
I was fortunate enough to be at the 1965 Indy, And yes, we certainly shook up the establishment, I think, with the funny cars, as they called them, the rear engine cars, which were, you know, entirely different design.
Traveling in bursts of over 190 miles per hour, Jimmy Clark burns up the straightaway like a football quarterback on an end run.
I suppose there might have been some resentment, but they were quick to copy, so that was interesting stuff. I think they respected their team. One of the funny things, of course, was back then the Beatles were very much in vogue, and one or two of our mechanics had Beatle-like haircuts. The Americans, of course, were all clean cut and crew cut, and we used to have a bit of trouble with Parnelli and AJ trying to capture us and cut our hair around the gasoline alley, but it was all good fun, really. And Jimmy Clark won the race, which was, you know, a tremendous effort, really.
Jim Clark crosses the finish line to win the 500 with a comfortable lead of more than 2 minutes.
And it's just been quite an incredible way of life.
My first car was a Lotus Europa in 1974, and then I started working at the dealer because I was there every week. Go figure. So I went there one day, Frank, Sports Car World, and he was working on the cars and nobody else was there because he fired everybody, so he hired me. And the rest is history. I worked there 5 years till '79. I bought the service end from him, and I just wanted to open my shop. I was there 30 years. Who knew? 30 years. I don't know how to say this politely. The engineering is brilliant, but the execution leaves something to be desired in a lot of areas. But that's where I stepped in. You know, I drive the cars. I know what brakes on them. Each model has a certain thing that brakes, and it's obvious why it does. So without redesigning the car, I fixed the problem.
He wanted to go racing, but he wanted me to drive his cars. We picked the 23B, and we've had wonderful success with it. We've won a lot of races, won a couple vintage championships with it.
Doc Bundy, our driver, who's a very experienced and very effective driver. It's the most important part of the package in terms of getting consistent lap times. And it's not only because the driver is fast, it's because he's consistent. So if he can consistently push the car close to the edge of its adhesion on the track without crossing it and then possibly damaging something, then he can provide a lot of really good feedback on what works better, what doesn't work better. If he can only push the car to 90% of its capability, you reach a plateau pretty quickly where you can't go any faster.
When I first started out, I wanted to be a Formula One driver. I would race Indy, and I would do endurance racing for fun.
Doc is something very, very special. In fact, he was the last person to win a championship for Lotus.
I approached Lotus about doing that and convinced them it was a good thing. And we raced the Esprit. We had great success. We won a championship in '92.
My perception of what makes Doc such a good fit for the team is that he's not afraid to talk about things. You know, he's not trying to diagnose it for us. Right? He's not telling us to look at the linkage. He's telling us exactly what he's feeling. Having a driver that can give you that level of feedback, who does not start arguments about what you should do, you know, to correct what he's feeling, that's a huge advantage. And that's just Doc's experience.
All cars are a challenge, obviously, but I love the process involved, and that's what kind of evolved out of me, was learning how to read a car and how to extract 100% from the car and 100% from myself and improve, and along the way, sometimes victories, sometimes not victories, sometimes mistakes, or you miss your setup, and you know, there's any number of things that happen. But overall, I have a wonderful life. I'm blessed. When people ask me my favorite car, they're all my favorites. I loved every one of them. I had a relationship with every car I've ever driven.
When I was at Sports Car World, we went to Long Beach Grand Prix in '78, and Mario was driving. That was my first Formula One event, and I just the sound today, it brings me back. So word got out and this car came available, so I bought it. I sent it to Lotus and had them redo it, and it's amazing.
When the opportunity came for him to buy that car, I was a little bit shocked. I hadn't worked on anything quite that sophisticated before. That's where finding the right people to help us with it became very important. You know, Classic Team Lotus, the guys in Colin Chapman's son Clive that still operates that business, they restored the car, gave us a pretty good amount of paperwork and some spares and tried to kind of lead us into a path. They would come over for the first few races, help train us on the idiosyncrasies of that particular car. That was a huge help. And now we've kind of got it to where we can run it ourselves without any help. It's taken a while.
I never even thought I'd have one of these, ever. Never even dreamed it. I'm living somebody else's dream.
Circuit of the Americas, near Austin, Texas, was created to be the new home of the U.S. Grand Prix. Built to the tune of $450 million, the grand opening ceremony for this world-class facility was held in early November 2012.
We were invited by the track and by Lotus F1 to come opening ceremony weekend.
We did an event in Austin with Lotus F1. We were supposed to bring a car down and Mario might sit in it. Then you get there, Lotus F1 blows up the motor, and our car is now the featured star of the show with Mario Andretti.
I've now met one of my gods, Mario, which is cool.
One of the opening acts for the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas would be a race of about 30 vintage Formula One cars, organized by Historic Grand Prix. Of course, it was never in doubt that Ragogo would be in the middle of the action in Austin.
Going to a Formula One race in Texas, first time in Austin, being kind of one of the star cars, just for several reasons, because we were from Texas, and also Mario Andretti drove it about 3 or 4 weeks ago before, so it was pretty cool. So we're, you know, it's not like we're stars, but it's celebrity status, so it's been a blast.
So we have a semi-truck. That helps a lot. So we equip the semi and leave it pretty well equipped through the season. TIG welder, lathe, drill press, you know, a lot of tools that are nice to have at the track. We pretty much take everything when we go on the track.
When they arrived at the track in Austin, the Ragogo team, the Lotus 79, and the other historic F1 cars were installed in a paddock for a couple of days of practice and qualifying.
We get an invitation to go to the Austin Grand Prix, and we spend time with Bernie Ecclestone. And you're walking up and down the back of the pits, and the nice thing for me, when the old mechanics will come out, and they'll see Bob walking along, they say, Bob Dance, is that really you? And they will check his hands to see if he's been working the weekend, and naturally,
right,
yeah, they did. Yeah. So, and Bob's hands were spotless, which is very unusual. When Bob goes to a race meeting, you never see Bob with clean hands.
We won the last race at Watkins Glen, so we know we're running pretty strongly.
I'm not as aggressive in the 79 as I am in the 23. 2 reasons. 79 is a much faster car, so the edge of disaster has higher consequences. And the value of the 2 cars, our 23 is probably value-wise maybe $150,000. This car is much closer to $1 million.
It's going to be a track where horsepower is very important. Braking will also be very important. And it's a very technical track, which means that the handling has to be there too. So bottom line is, if your car falls down in any one of those 3 areas, it's going to be tough here.
They shared the paddock with Ferraris and Porsches that would compete in the 2 other support races for the weekend. It's not often you see so many millions of dollars worth of exotic vehicles gathered in one location, but the undisputed stars of the paddock were the historic cars. Representing the era from the mid-60s through the early 80s, these cars were originally driven by some of racing's greatest drivers.
The current teams, when we're on the grid there, they come out to the pit wall or come over the wall and they get their pictures taken and all that sort of thing. So they're kind of recognizing us.
but there are about 5 other people that will be too.
Its one weakness is brakes. It cost Mario races. It's cost me a race, and we're working on that. We're trying to solve that issue, and I think we're getting closer. We'll see this weekend. This track, the new Circuit of America is going to put a premium on braking, so we better have figured that out.
So, one Saturday in mid-November, the Ragogo team found themselves racing on the day before the inaugural U.S. Grand Prix, before a crowd of over 80,000.
And given the amount of work that they had to do, he was saying there were times where they just didn't get any sleep.
In a museum, they just look a little bit sad. But they look right on track.
There's always going to be something that you don't expect, but you prepare as well as you can for it.
I went down at the end of that straightaway, tucked inside there. I thought, well, I'm going to get a couple cars here. And then suddenly I wasn't slowing down. I had my foot down there, but she ain't slowing down. I was afraid they were going to turn in on me. You know, the other cars are going to start turning from the corner, but they saw me blasting in there and realized, oh, okay.
So a few laps in, we started getting a leak at the left front caliper seal. That meant probably at lap 4 or 5, no front brakes.
The car spun, and I knew I had a lot of energy, so I just kept it spinning and then put it in gear and took off.
From what we can tell right now, I haven't really gotten into it, but it looks like it was a parts failure. Brake seals, they usually last more than 250 miles, which is what that one failed after.
Doc was able to re-enter the track pretty quickly. I think he went from maybe 10th place to 15th place.
Covering well. Look at slip sliding through the axis. What a beautiful sight.
They were saying, do you want to come in and have us look at something? Because they knew I don't spin unless there's a problem. And I finally just told them, I got a brake issue, I got no front brakes. So I'm going to see if I can hang in here, because I don't like quitting. I'll finish back, I'll finish in 17th.
So the last 4 laps, he was racing with no front brakes, and I believe lost 1 position, which is a bit of a shocker. And he's quite a driver.
He knows what he's doing. He does it well, he does it with style, and he seems to be happy as hell, so that's a good thing.
The Texas, they call it the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas. I call it the Texas Grand Prix. It was our home state. It's our home event. So, I mean, the dynamic of that, having Paul, having one of the greatest cars there, and the disappointment of having the car not really perform up to all it's capable of.
It was fun, that's what it's all about, but we don't go there to lose, and the car had an issue on the first lap, but he still finished ahead of most, well, half the cars anyway, with no front brakes. Got a great driver, it's a great car.
I apologized to her. I was mad, and then I said, no, I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry this happened. The racing god said, not today, Doc, not today.
But it's a total blast. I couldn't think of anything better to be doing.
We still all had a great time, and we can't wait to go back.
Look for Doc Bundy, the Lotus 79, and the Ragogo team to be back on the track in 2013, keeping the checkered past alive.